Welcome to the Innovation Race podcast, where we meet fascinating inventors, innovators, politicians, and leaders who share the view that what's best for our country is to protect patents and keep innovation in America. Now, here's your host, Jenny Beth Martin.
Our documentary film, Innovation Race, focuses on intellectual property and also on the challenges America faces competing with China. We interviewed Jackie Deal because she is an expert on international affairs and national security. Jackie is the co-founder of the American Academy of Strategic Education, which teaches courses on net assessment, China, and political warfare. I think you're going to learn as much as I did when I interviewed Jackie because of her passion for national security. And by the way, our film Innovation Race, it's going to be in select theaters on November 16th, 2022. You can find out more about how to watch it at innovationracemovie.com. And now, here's Jackie Deal. I'm so glad you're with us today, Jackie. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny Beth.
So I think that the first thing people are going to want to know is explain just a little bit about what Long-Term Strategy Group does, and also what does American Academy for Strategic Education do?
Sure. I had the good fortune a couple decades ago now, when I was in graduate school studying military history, pursuing a PhD, to meet a legendary defense thinker, and his name was Andy Marshall. He did pioneering work in the Cold War to help us analyze how we were doing in the competition with the Soviets and diagnose opportunities to help us win it. And he suggested that I study China's military strategy for my master's thesis and dissertation research. And so I followed his advice, and that put me on a track to try to help the country understand what's driving the Chinese Communist Party's military buildup and what is the CCP's strategy. So I've been working on that now for about the better part of 2 decades, 18 years. And Long-Term Strategy Group does research in support of the office that Andy Marshall used to run in the Pentagon, called the Office of Net Assessment. And the American Academy for Strategic Education is a nonprofit that I co-founded about a decade ago now with 2 professors who had also benefited from the mentorship of Andrew Marshall and had worked for the Office of Net Assessment. And we wanted to expand the universe of people who were able to think about how the competition, in this case now with the Chinese, is going based on the techniques we had learned from Andy and from the office. And so we teach courses to early to mid-career national security professionals. We have military officers and civilians who take the course, and we try to expose them to ways to do research and analysis that helps the United States government and the Defense Department figure out where are our opportunities to apply American strengths and to protect us from the exploitation of our vulnerabilities in the competition in which we now find ourselves.
I think one of the things that we hope that we are doing with Innovation Race is really showing that there is a real threat for China to surpass America when it comes to innovation, when it comes to which country is a world leader, and that there's this real challenge between America and China right now. And I think that we're still at a place where America is ahead in most aspects, but we have to be very diligent and watching what is happening and making sure that we're setting America up to continue to be dominant to China. Could you explain why that is so important? Why should what is the threat if China exceeds America when it comes to being a world power or a superpower?
Wow, that's a very important question. Thank you for the opportunity to address it. And I should say thank you. I had the opportunity to see the film at the premiere, and it's absolutely a tour de force. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's really brilliant. It drives home something that gets to the answer to your question, which is the Chinese Communist Party have studied the American system very closely over decades. And I think it's fair to say they've concluded that they want to put the Chinese Communist Party in a position globally that the United States, they think, has inhabited in terms of being at the center of information flows, intellectual property flows, capital flows, being dominant over standards that international institutions and actors use. And the film explains how, particularly in the realm of intellectual property, the decline of our protection of property rights here and of patents in particular has enabled them to rise. I was aware before seeing the film that the Chinese Communist Party was incentivizing individuals, research institutions, corporations in China to secure patents, and that was an important metric for promotion in different realms. But I was not as aware until I had seen the film of the decline or the decay in our system that's helping them with that ambition to the point where now, as people discuss, some international actors are choosing to litigate patents in the PRC, the People's Republic of China, which should be shocking because, as we know, this is a rule by men, not rule of law system. This is a rule by the Chinese Communist Party. Property rights are not protected there. There is no independent property rights. So if we move to a world where the CCP, in Xi Jinping's terms, achieves the China dream, and you can see the kind of homage to the American dream there, it's kind of a dark inversion of what we have. Right now, we have secure private property rights and intellectual property protection and the rule of law, which is supposed to create a neutral playing field for Americans and, frankly, internationally. The American military tries to secure the international commons and sea lines of communication and ensure that countries can trade and engage efficiently, effectively, commercially with each other and prosper. The Chinese Communist Party version of that would be to put themselves at the center of those kinds of interactions, but in a way that disproportionately or asymmetrically favors the Chinese Communist Party, which believes that the goal of international competition is to accrue wealth and power, and that those go together and they're mutually reinforcing. And the CCP, I think, would like to achieve a position where it's at the center of these kinds of flows of important information, technology, military activities, and has a kind of veto say over how other states regulate themselves, what other countries do, the terms of trade, and all of this would be designed to kind of keep the CCP in the driver's seat or disproportionately advantage China. So it's a very different system from the one where, again, we have a division of power, separation of powers. We have the military is out there to protect the sea lines of communication and the commons, but it's not as though the Treasury Department or Commerce or the U.S. Trade Representative takes advantage of that set of actions or activities to disproportionately favor the American economy. Not at all. But I think if the CCP succeeds, that's what we'll be encountering. And you can already see it because every time there's a dust-up or a dispute, the lever that the Chinese Communist Party chooses to pull is, well, maybe you're not going to get your supplies of rare earths, Japan, or maybe we're not going to import any more of your fruit, Taiwan, or et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
There's a clear inclination and pattern now of mixing military might and economic tools in a way that suggests that their view is might makes right, and this is a very zero-sum business.
I think that what's happening, especially when it comes to the patent system, the way that I think of it is that China and the CCP right now are giving inventors a false sense of security. They think that if they go there and patent there, right now, as they litigate their patents and are able to protect them, China may actually be doing a little bit better job of that than America is doing. They certainly give the perception that that is what is happening. But you and I both know if you don't respect property rights, personal property, physical property, you're not going to respect intellectual property. And if you're willing to take over the assets of a corporation or to take over the personal property of someone, like, or lock them in their apartments and not let them leave at all, you're certainly not going to have any problem saying, well, this patent actually belongs to the CCP. So I find it just a bit of a false sense of security. And the best way that we can fix that and right that and give the correct perception to inventors is to fix our patent system, which is what I hope that our film winds up going through and doing.
Yes, I think there's a real risk that our innovative capacity, our inventiveness, which is clearly one of our most important strengths, is at risk. And studies have shown that in the period in which we've been engaging in commerce and trade with China, our innovation rates have actually declined. So while we've achieved some benefits, clearly we've gotten a lot of cheap stuff. We've had access to relatively less expensive labor. It's been at this major cost of our rate of innovation. And, for the world, actually, that's a big problem because American innovation and our innovative capacity is kind of a global good, and it's certainly core to American strength and prosperity. And so all Americans should be very concerned about the price we're paying for, cheap stuff from Walmart.
Now, at the end of the film, when we were showing it at the premiere, there was a panel discussion, and you heard from Congressman Thomas Massey, and I think that during that panel discussion, you had some thoughts about it you might want to share.
Sure. Obviously, Congressman Massey is an inventor himself, so he's very close to this set of issues. And what he noted in the panel about, I think, maybe the last quarter of the film is there's a remark that we still have a fairly long runway, or we still have about 2 decades, 20 years, where we're ahead of the Chinese in various important technical areas, such as semiconductors. And I would like to believe that, but as Congressman Massey said, unfortunately, I agree, we are actually not that far ahead at this point. And believing that we're perennially 2 decades ahead is a kind of potentially a recipe for complacency at a point where, over the time I've been working on this set of issues, I've seen China kind of go from down here to maybe here, and in some areas maybe here, or at least the Chinese Communist Party wants the world to believe that in important domains they're up here already. So we need to be very careful about resting on our laurels or assuming that we have a lot of time. And in the particular discussion in the film, this is the last section where semiconductors comes up. There's an emphasis on the fact that there's this one firm in Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, TSMC, which makes the world's leading edge chips. And I think what Congressman Massey might have said, or what the film could say, is at some point when the CCP diagnoses that it's close enough to making its own leading edge chips, or it, for other reasons, wants to deprive the world of access to TSMC, that will be yet another of the many reasons why it could launch an invasion or a blockade or some kind of aggression against Taiwan. So this whole innovation landscape and set of issues and economic security issues and technology issues figures directly in the incentive structure that will affect war and peace over Taiwan and therefore globally at this point. I think it's fair to say that if there's a war over Taiwan, there could be another world war, or that could be a recipe for war, at least between the United States and China, which would be global.
Right. And I first met you as we started hearing more about Taiwan in the news in recent history as Speaker Pelosi went to Taiwan. Why do you think it is important as Americans and America to make sure we're looking out for the interests of Taiwan? I know we kind of talk about that in the film, but from your standpoint, not just looking at intellectual property, but looking at the global situation?
First, let me just say how all Americans should have been very concerned about the discussions around the speaker's visit, because it was reported in the Wall Street Journal that senior American military leaders, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the commander of the Indo-Pacific, it was at least reported that they were advising the speaker, the president, that they didn't think it was a good idea for the speaker to make this trip. And then when Speaker Pelosi decided to travel anyway, many people, so many people that the website crashed, were looking at flighttracker.com to watch her trip. And she dodged around the international airspace over the South China Sea seemingly in deference to China's claims over that region, went east to get to Taiwan. So already, I think as an American, I am very concerned that we are signaling that we are threatened, we are not comfortable with the risks that we face to do what essentially should be normal business, fly through international airspace, have a speaker visit Taiwan, which has happened in the past under slightly different circumstances, but nonetheless respond to an invitation to come visit for, 24 hours, less than 24 hours. So the atmospherics and the reaction to the visit already should have people's attention. It's hard to imagine Ronald Reagan in the same position or making the same choices vis-a-vis that visit. And Americans are used to the idea that our military, we spend more than the next 10 countries combined. We have the best military in the world. And I hope and I believe that we do, but the margin has changed. We are not nearly as far ahead of the People's Liberation Army of the Chinese Communist Party as we were again when I started working on this set of issues in 2003, 4, 5, unfortunately. And part of that is we've been properly engaged in winning other wars that we were fighting, while they've been kind of almost exclusively focused on building up the PLA as an anti-U.S. Navy, an anti-U.S. Air Force, anti-U.S. Army force. We've been spending on capabilities, operations, and maintenance to win in the Middle East and Central Asia, which is different from focusing like a laser on the PLA. So there's an asymmetry there. And the reason that this is potentially coming to a head and should be of interest to all Americans is, in addition to being a free island of 23-odd million people, but that's very prosperous. People should love to visit Taiwan because it's the free China. It's what China could be, should be. It's very prosperous. The food is delicious. The people are charming. It's beautiful. It's also, I guess some people have referred to it as the kind of cork in the bottle, because for some number of decades, the PLA has had their sights set on Taiwan, and it's been building up its missiles to range the island across the Taiwan Strait. And if somehow the PLA succeeded in taking Taiwan, then it would be freer to turn its attention to a whole other next set of objectives that could include parts of Japan, one of our closest allies, our closest ally in East Asia, in the Indo-Pacific potentially, further south towards the Philippines, another traditional American ally, and it would open up China, which has previously felt hemmed in, or the PLA, the Chinese Communist Party, has been concerned about being hemmed in from access to the open waters of the Western Pacific. So that set of concerns would go away, and we would be facing an even still much more dramatic threat to important sea lines of communication. We would be dealing with a Beijing or a Chinese Communist Party leadership that's even less inhibited than Xi Jinping is today. And already I think everybody is concerned at how aggressive or assertive Xi Jinping has felt free to be in recent years, from the takeover of Hong Kong, the genocide in Western China against the Uyghurs, the defiance of international obligations in at least reporting on the pandemic in real time to the World Health Organization, the threats to any country that asks any questions about how the pandemic was handled at the outset, the threat from Chinese state media organs to shoot down Nancy Pelosi's plane.
Right.
I mean, this is way beyond anything that we've ever seen and anything that we, should comfortably accept.
Right. I think that one thing that we're so deeply divided as a country right now, and it concerns me, and I understand why there is deep division on so many different issues. Traditionally, when America may be divided inside the country, when we look to the outside, we normally are united on how we approach things internationally. And right now, I don't know that that's exactly where we are. But I do think that most Americans understand that China is not our, maybe they're our pure enemy, but they're not exactly the best ally either. I don't know exactly where that falls, but I think that making sure that America wins this race with China is an issue that truly should be bipartisan or nonpartisan. It should just be something that unites all Americans.
Yes.
As you're doing the research and you're working through your think tank and working with the long-term strategy group in your position with your job, do you think that you're seeing bipartisan agreement on the concerns with China?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I mean, I saw it in the film at the premiere. I know that Senator Coons from Delaware was sitting at this table across from you, and Gary Lauder, the investor, but also I think, the Democratic Party contributor, felt compelled to contribute and participate and speak out about the set of issues that is covered in the film, because they don't see this as partisan, neither do I. This is about security, national security, and freedom and opportunity, and all Americans are interested in a level playing field. Again, opportunity, freedom, the legacy of the founding fathers, what we were born into, the good fortune that we had to be here, to be in the United States, to live in a time where, except for this major threat, we have access to other places in the world, and people are trading and prospering. So I think actually most Americans do understand this set of issues, whether it's because they've been harmed by Chinese Communist Party predatory economic behavior, or because they're following military affairs and they're alarmed by the new hypersonic missiles they see, or the Chinese nuclear buildup that they can observe by the PLA. People get it. People get it when they have family members who have lost their jobs in factories because we've been kind of hollowed out, frankly, in the period where we've been so eager to trade, and we've also now had so many people lose loved ones to fentanyl, which is also a shocking development from a country that is, as so locked down, where there's more cameras than people in major cities, where there's victims of the COVID pandemic locked in residential communities right now, literally starving. And yet these horrible drugs can get out. Right. I mean, a country with a social credit score and a justified reputation for paranoia and surveillance just can't get a hold of those drugs. So Americans are dying.
Yeah, and that part seems sort of suspicious, that those drugs can get out when they can control so many other aspects. You mentioned the standards, and that China wants to dominate standards. Would you explain to the audience what you mean when you say standards, and then why do you think it's important that China does not dominate those standards internationally?
Well, the dollar is a standard. We're all accustomed to being able to pay for things in dollars and recognize prices in dollars. So standards are internationally accepted conventions, and they can be economic or international legal conventions like patents or patent protections. They can be technical or electronic, like the 5G network standards that people have heard about because Huawei, a Chinese state-backed company, was subsidized to try to dominate that field. It's something that's kind of internationally recognized and in currency or traded internationally, and there are network effects or platform effects, scale effects, where if you control the standard, you are going to be in a kind of privileged position, or could be in a privileged position in terms of calling the shots, information flows, knowledge of what's happening in real time. So again, in our system, to the extent that we've had that privilege or that set of privileges, we haven't used it to kind of build high fences or wall off competitors nationally, because we believe in the market, and we believe in trade, and we have firm divisions and the rule of law. We don't have a government that's locking Americans or anyone else, up in their houses. their system is so different. It's so unconstrained that if they are in control of these international standards and in the flow of the information rights that come from that, we know based on their writing, their history, their outlook on international competition, that they will use it to build up China's wealth and power, and really the CCP's wealth and power at the expense of everybody else. And shame on us if we don't avail ourselves of the sources that tell us that that's the plan, and if we don't defend ourselves by preventing that.
I started thinking about the standards a few years ago, and when it comes to technology, I used to program computers, so I understand a bit. I haven't programmed computers in quite a while, but I do understand the importance of having standards, whether it's with 5G or USB cables or many different things. When you have those standards, you can program around them and make computer components talk to one another, even if they're manufactured by different corporations. When it comes to like 5G and the Internet of Things, I want to know that the standards that are being developed for the Internet of Things actually are based in a system that respects individual rights, and not just property rights, but individual rights. And I don't think we have that at all from China. And those are the kind of things that, as an American, I never even was paying attention to who's on the board that is determining these standards. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, these are the kind of things that I'm glad there are people in our country who are paying attention to it, because it could change how the technology could be used against any of us in the future.
Yes, and I think absolutely, you put it better than I did and more succinctly. And I think one issue is it puts us in a position of dependence. Dependence because we know that they have superior information if they control these standards, and dependence because they control the key inputs, or they pass through Beijing. And that's not a position that America should be comfortable with, or America's leaders. It's not a position that the American military should be comfortable with, or it's not good for the American economy. It's fine to have global trade and interdependence as our kind of main paradigm, but in certain key areas, clearly we need to be self-sufficient, whether that's and capable of kind of calling the shots on our own, whether it's our ability to produce PPE or key pharmaceutical ingredients and components. In 5G, it's not acceptable to be dependent on the sole provider, or what looked like a position of almost dependence on Huawei to kind of provide the backbone systems for our communications. That there are certain things that we can't leave just to the markets. There are certain things that for national defense, we actually have to provide for ourselves, the international market.
What haven't we talked about as far as the film goes that you want to maybe highlight, or that you think is important that would make you want to show it to your colleagues and people in your network?
Well, again, I mean, the fact that it's so bipartisan, it's nonpartisan, the innovation ecosystem in the United States, it's not bound by, any kind of other divisions internally. It's not about race or ethnicity or any kind of preference or class. It's about human spirit and ingenuity, and that's part of the American dream. And I worry when we focus on things other than that, because that set of conditions and opportunities is so fundamental to who we are as a people, that young kids and teenagers and the backyard tinkerers have an opportunity to pursue their inventions and create and benefit, and they're incentivized to do so because they know that they have the ability to secure their rights to what they create. That's so fundamental to who we are. It kind of transcends other divisions, and at the same time, there's good evidence out there that the Chinese Communist Party's strategy is to leverage and exacerbate internal divisions in the places it has targeted, like the United States, where it wants to have more influence. So the more that we find ourselves divided over things that are, not related to our fundamental ability to pursue economic opportunity and happiness, the more we're going to see interventions in our politics, in our elections, but in our society from what's called the United Front work system of the Chinese Communist Party that are designed to kind of stoke those divisions and tensions and keep us preoccupied internally and divided and therefore weaker. So I think the film is very important because it casts our eyes to it directs our attention to something that's extremely important and maybe taken for granted. Again, even I was aware of China's patent pursuits and push. I was less aware of what's going on in the United States, what has been happening that has decayed or degraded our ability to rely on intellectual property rights and the patent system here. So I learned.
When it comes to these inventors and the ingenuity that they have, I just want to help them so much and make sure that they are able to continue to do what they do and to be able to benefit from it for a limited period of time, because the world benefits from the things that they can think of that I haven't been able to think of something that no one else in the world has ever thought of. And so I'm glad that we're able to do something that helps them, but also highlights the importance of this to our own country and to the world as well. So I'm excited that we were able to produce the film. Jackie, thank you so much for being with us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or to share your website, or for people who want to find more information about you and to follow the studies and what you're doing? Where can they go?
Sure. I have a page at www.AASE.org. So that's for the American Academy for Strategic Education, and my writings, or many of them, are there in testimony and appearances like this. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm going to go tell all my friends and everybody else who will listen to go see the Innovation Race.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for participating in this podcast and watching it. And we will make sure we include the link for Jackie's website in the description of it. And remember, our film, Innovation Race, is coming to theaters on November 16th, 2022. For more information about the documentary, go to innovationracemovie.com.
The Innovation Race podcast is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin and produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, Lori Heiselman, and Andy Peterson. Luke Livingston directs the video podcast. Innovation Race podcast is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org. That's teapartypatriots.org.